Welcome to the Strangers on the Way podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest. I met Jean Deming when I was visiting my brother in Sarasota, Florida, and my mom and I wandered into this incredibly creative museum called the Marietta Museum of Whimsy. And if you're on the YouTube video, you can see actually the background right now. Or if you're watching from or listening from the podcast, I recommend you pop into the YouTube video link as well, just to see the background. But the museum is such a creative space of a variety of different types of art, lots of color. And as my mom and I were journeying through, looking at all of the different art pieces, we came to a kitchen area with some beverages, some flavored waters, and this woman who was just like glowing in joy. And we got to talk to Jean and just really were captivated by her spirit. And so, Jean, welcome to the podcast. So excited to have you. Would you just start sharing a little bit more about who you are with our listeners and what brought you to the museum?
Well, I'm retired as the arts and cultural coordinator for the city of Ithaca, and moved to Hamilton, New York, which is a small community college town for Colgate University. But I'm fortunate enough to be able to come to Sarasota for winter. And after being here for a while, I found this wonderful museum. It seemed like the perfect place to be a volunteer, and found out what a wonderful experience it is as a retired person to be able to volunteer with wonderful people who have similar interests. So it was a good experience for me, very enlightening and very rewarding. And it made me really appreciate having a place where you could volunteer and have so many people to talk shop with.
Yes, I was so taken aback by just how friendly all of the volunteers were and how full of life and joy. What's the experience been like just serving with everyone? And why did you choose like that museum in particular? How did you hear about it and get connected?
Well, my experience in life, I had a lot of jobs that were quite enjoyable, but also very serious. And this just gave me an opportunity to become a part of something that was, in fact, whimsical and didn't require you to wear a uniform. So when I think of the various very rewarding jobs that I had in my life, um, appreciating all of them, whether it was working in the medical field where you wore a uniform, or for a while when I was very young, I worked sort of in the glamour days with the airline, and that was a uniform, which was quite military. And then in my job on the mayor's staff, I wore what I called my little man uniform, which was suit. And on days when I felt like I needed it, I would even wear a tie. So here they said, dress colorful, however you would like to dress, appropriate for the museum. And I thought, that's wonderful. And the other thing is the job that I have here at the museum, which I call minding my post. It's wonderful because I'm just here to welcome visitors, to keep them refreshed because it gets very warm, and you can be certainly in need of being rehydrated. And also we have a wonderful place to sit down, which helps cure your museum feet, because you do get museum feet. And oftentimes our visitors will come with another sticker on that they've been to another museum in the morning, or they've been at the Selby Garden, and that they're here and on their feet, and they enjoy a comfortable place to sit, to look around. And it's wonderful because it's a crossroads, and it's so similar to the theme of your podcast. And I think I made mention once about the person I had met who wrote the book, Cavorting with Strangers in Paris, which I thought was fun. So every day, with every new person that comes that I chat with, it's another page in this wonderful book of life experiences. The people are very interesting, extremely kind. I've never had a bad moment at work, and I enjoy it. How could you not?
Oh, I just love that so very much. And I love that you don't have to wear a uniform there. So you can, like, it's a whimsical place, and then you also get to be whimsical in your dress, you know? And
Yes.
yes, I noticed that about you. You're just like beautiful, like a beautiful woman, and so poised. And so I'm glad that you get to express yourself fully in this role as well. It's so good. What's your favorite, one of your favorite pieces at the museum?
Well, I think the piece that I like the most happens to be the one that's directly opposite my post. So when I was talking with you and your mom, I was looking directly up at a beautiful painting of a wedding. And I don't know if you recall it, but it's quite lovely. And it reminded me very much of an experience I had in Casanova, New York. There's a wonderful art park on a beautiful expanse of land up in the hills. And it was land that was donated by a woman for this art park. And for a benefit for the art park, they brought the Alvin Alley dancers in. And we were set up, they were set up on a stage out of doors in a scene very similar to this painting. And, you know, this wonderful painting has a group of people, long dresses, old fashioned, tiny, 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 tiny little chapel in the woods. The ladies are in lovely long dresses and each carrying a parasol. And it's very similar to the whole experience I had sitting there watching this particular performance. So it was just kind of like a pleasant but unexpected moment.
I love that. That's beautiful. It's amazing when something from your life comes up to, and then in a piece of art. That's beautiful.
And more than that, I was experiencing quite a large number of people, and we were chatting, and someone made mention of Rochester, New York, and somebody else said, oh, and they mentioned another small town that was in the general area. And before I knew what was happening, there was a man talking with me, and we were talking about this small community. And, you know, he was talking about growing up in this very small community. And I said, well, that was where my grandmother lived. And before the conversation was over, I found out that when he was a young man, boy, actually, I think he said he was 12, he had been at my aunt and uncle's wedding. So it was, you know,
Wow.
you just never know
Yes.
when you meet all of these people, what's going to come of it. But interesting, wonderful people.
Wow. Oh, I love that. And you said one of your jobs was arts and cultural coordinator. How did the arts become a part of your life, and like what have they meant to you throughout your life?
Well, I guess I've always been a bit in conflict between what I wanted to do or be, you know, and so for a while I was really interested in science, medicine, that type of thing, but I was torn with being also interested in art, particularly in the presentation of art or the management of art rather than myself being an artist. So as my life evolved, and boy, you never know how that's going to happen, I just had different opportunities. So my first experience was in medicine, and I worked for the National Hemophilia Foundation in a hospital treating children with hemophilia. And it was rewarding, but sad. And it was at a time when the basic treatment was to just make sure that they lived sort of in a gentle way, because people think of hemophilia as a bleeding disease, which it is, but they think of it in terms of cutting yourself and bleeding, where the big danger was bleeding into your joints, bleeding into your muscles from activity. And at that time, unfortunately, a lot of my patients didn't live to grow up. So I did it for a while, went through a very sad experience with a family of wonderful little children, lost 2 little boys, brothers, and I decided that I just needed to maybe do something else for a little while. So that was what, as I jokingly say, I couldn't, run off to the stage, or what could I do? And I couldn't really sing or dance professionally. So what do? You either run off and join the airline, or you run off and join the circus. So I got a better offer from the airline than I got from the circus.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, my life just sort of hopped around, and eventually I wound up having a gallery. And it was during the period of the, it was the 70s, and everyone was going back to beautifully handcrafted jewelry and to woodworking. And I was fortunate enough to meet a couple of women, and we opened a store and had quite a successful store, to the point when my husband got a job out of town, which is what took us to Ithaca. So I had to sell the store and move on to Ithaca. And it was at that point that I went back to school for a while, and eventually got the job with the city of Ithaca. And on one hand, it was the arts and the festivals and the activities, which was wonderful. On the other hand, it was also managing the protests, the complications of businesses in the center of the downtown, which was also a very important area for cultural events. So there was a lot of people who were there in need of permits, and people who were there, unfortunately, to have to eventually hear, in about the nicest way I could say, I'm sorry that that's not possible. So coming here to the museum, I was so lucky to get assigned to this wonderful post that I have, and I never have to say no. Isn't that great?
That is great. I know it's nice when you can, yes, have happy people around you and not have to say that. That's so funny. I'd love to hear, just throughout your life, any life lessons. So like, some of our listeners are a bit younger. What would you say to them, just as you've reflected on your journey? It could be in any theme or area, just some of like your life lessons.
Well, I think what's important, and I learn more of it every day, the value is keeping in touch, and it's keeping in touch in a personal way. In other words, be with people, communicate, share, talk work, and if you're not working, talk hobby, talk anything that you're interested in, but stay communicated. And I see that this is really important as you age, and as your world shrinks a little, which happens, because eventually you give a second thought to, am I going to travel overseas? Do I worry about being far away from my family or my doctor? All of those kinds of things. And it's so important to keep communicating. Don't become isolated. Be with people that like what you like, as far as the things that you enjoy, the arts or anything, gardening. And there's the joy of sharing this interest. There's the joy of doing it together. And I look around and I see too many people on their devices all the time. And I'm wondering that the isolation, and I worry that it interferes in some way with young people's creativity. Because as older people do, and we try not to, we talk about, well, when I was a little kid, I didn't have all these toys. I didn't have these devices. I didn't have a Barbie doll house. But I remember in the neighborhood where I lived, when we got together, somebody had a bat, somebody had a ball, somebody had a glove, and we were able to pull together a boys girls softball team, even to the point where twice a year the parents would get together and divide themselves up so that they weren't on their kids' team, and it was a big softball game. Well, it was so delightful, and I want to see more of that. I want to see the creativity that can come out of a group of children or teens or young adults or older people. When you get together, what is it that you as a group, bringing in your experience, your creativity, what is it that you can come up with? I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I love that. I when I grew up, it was just before the cell phones came. I think they came when I was in high school, maybe junior high, and we were that like go out in the neighborhood all day, play baseball, and then come home for dinner, like generation. And I'm so grateful that's how like my brother and I got to grow up. But you're right, like it's a bit different now, and I know technology is going to be here, but like, do you have any advice? Like, how do we facilitate those group opportunities and connections in this era? Like, does that make sense? Like, what are ways we can cultivate that?
Well, this is what I've noticed that I think might work. It is working for people that are my age, more or less. When there's something that's of interest, and it might be not necessarily something that you've always been interested in. Let's say gardening. We're going to use that as an example. And because you have the conveniences of these devices that people have, so communicating is relatively easy. So you just have to find a way that becomes appealing, that will get a group of people together to either join us because we know you love your gardening, or did you know that you can create a garden in a place where you can't grow anything? How would you like to learn how to put together a cairn garden? And then you talk to them a little bit about finding these stones and building these cairns. And for the people who say, oh, I have a brown thumb, I can't grow anything. Well, then you find out that there's a glue that's called this to that. That will, and you just look it up on your device, and you can glue anything to anything, and they'll tell you what glues you get to do that. So maybe you're interested in rocks, or maybe you just think these crazy people are just having fun. I think I'll go do it. And you bring together somebody that can do this garden in a public place, and you've done something for your community, you've had fun, and you have a couple of picnics after you're doing this, and it all begins to work. And now you've got this social group. And this is really what's so important to older people or to the people who get transferred. When I was growing up, more or less, your dad pretty much had the job his whole life and your whole life. And you never lost your best friend because they got transferred to California. So for the people who are coming into communities, this is a wonderful way too, to find somebody or, a group of people that are interested in something you're either interested in or something that you've always wanted to find out about.
I love that. And something I noticed about what you were sharing is it's like doing things with our hands almost, or like doing things, and I think culturally, a lot of us are behind screens or for work. And so I love that. It's almost like having a hobby outside of that that involves movement and exploration and creativity. So good wisdom, very, very good wisdom. Yes. What else are you passionate about? What other things do you love?
Oh, I think that I just love, and this is crazy, but these wonderful little lizards that they have here in Florida. There are
Yeah.
apparently two different kinds. One that will change color along with whatever they're sitting against, and the other ones. So I have this raised bed in front of my little house, and I have my plantings in there, and the lizards like to be in there. And I do have some of the little solar lights, because the bugs will go to the solar lights and the lizards like to eat the bugs. So it's a good relationship there. But I talk to them, and they do stop, and they do tilt their head, and they
Oh,
do look up at me, and I have a sense that maybe I'm communicating with them.
yeah.
And I have a nephew now who is grown, but when he was little, he had his own business, and he and his dad raised these wonderful little lizards and sold them to the pet shop. So I can remember saying to Ricky, well, Ricky, what did you name your new lizard? And he would look at me and he would say, Aunt Jean, I told you, this is a business. This is not a hobby. I don't name them. This is
I love that. Oh,
so I think appreciating nature, getting your children, your young children, your grandchildren involved in nature. I have a young friend who is a pediatric nurse practitioner. And she said the most important thing in raising children today is get them out of doors, get them out, let them run free, let them enjoy nature, because they're not doing as much of that as they used to. And it encourages a lot of creative play and the interaction and appreciation of nature. And from what she says, it really helps keep them in balance physically and mentally and socially. I
yeah.
hope that makes sense. Talking to the
So much
lizards
sense.
really works.
Yeah, I love it. I have some friends that talk to their like house plants, and I actually saw this experiment where this man spoke to three different bottles of rice, and there was rice in these three containers. And for one, he just shared like only loving words, like "Oh, rice, you're so great," like all these positive things. The second one he didn't really acknowledge, and then the third one he spoke poorly to this rice, like, "Oh, you're terrible." And after 6 months, or maybe 6 weeks, the rice with the bad words spoken to them actually molded, and the good ones stayed white. And so it is amazing, like how our words matter. And so it makes sense that talking to the lizards that um, they would communicate.
And it's wonderful. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I usually, if I there, will run out and count how many lizards are on the wall, because apparently that's the peak time of the day when the wall is the warmest, and they love to be warm and in the sun. So I keep going out there and looking at them, and you also, you're enjoying this, but you have this need to be productive. So I'll stand there and I'll say, one little lizard sitting on the wall. And then by the time I get to 9 or 13 or whatever, I'm thinking, this could be a great little kid's book. So you just never know what you're going to get out of these kinds of experiences.
I love that. Oh, Jean, your joy is so contagious. It's like really beautiful. Yeah, beautiful to see. I
Thank
love
you.
it. Yes. Well, as we wrap up, I would just love to hear any yeah, any last thoughts for our listeners? Any other advice or wisdom, or things that you'd like to share, or experiences from childhood, or anything at all?
I think that you need to make a pause as you go through life, whether you're in your working situation, your learning situation, being a part of, your the whole education process. Um, all these experiences that you're having, and make a pause and think about the people that you touch and the people that touch you in some way. I mean, it can be someone who just in passing gives you a big smile. I noticed that in wonderful countries that I've been to, the kindness of people of all ages. And when my daughter and I traveled, I always put the map, I rotated in the direction I'm walking. Well, all people had to do in Portugal was to see this mother and daughter with these maps going in the direction that they were going. And with big smiles, they would say, could they help us find what we were looking for? And I think if you notice these things, if you appreciate these things, they can not only lift your spirit for your inner self, but you in return, in your response, can oftentimes let them know how you appreciate their kindness. And I would have to say that the people whose lives you weave through as you weave through life can have a very important part in shaping your attitude and helping you look beyond today and think about what it is that you want to do that will meet your dreams, but will also let the people who are involved in this weaving through life that you're doing, rewarding them in some way. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes a ton of sense. I love that.
There's so much about the journey, and
Yeah.
there's so much about how you involve yourself with the people you meet along the way.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, it's so good. That is like really why I started this, because um, obviously our family and those very close to us have like primary relationship with us. That's really crucial. But then there is like this beautiful weaving of strangers and connections, and you can learn and appreciate everyone that you encounter. And so I love how you've done that throughout your life. And there's actually a book. I'm officing out of our church today, and I'm borrowing someone's office, and there's a journal book next to me that says, "Life is here, live it." And that's what I just feel like, Jean, you live life like to the fullest. And it's just beautiful to see, um, yeah, just how you've postured your heart and interacted with people in your life. And I'm just very moved by you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I so much enjoyed meeting you and your mom. And I hope that we see you again when you come back to visit your brother.
Yes, yes, we'll be back. And listeners, if you're in Sarasota, highly recommend Marietta Museum of Whimsy. It will inspire you. It will spark creativity. It will bring you joy. Just like you, Jean. I feel like you're like the poster person for for the museum, just in how you live your life. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.